hands together as we welcome to the stage the fabulous Drifters.
Welcome to Carol Journey TV. I'm your host, Carolyn Smith-Malone. We have a special guest that we're going to interview today, Mr. Robert Wiggins.
Hi.
Robert, hi. How you doing?
How you doing, Carol?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Haven't heard from you in a long, long time, man.
Yeah, well, I'm hibernating like everybody else.
Right. Yeah, I want to talk to you about your music situations and stuff like that. I understand that you once toured with the Drifters.
Yeah, I
Can you
toured
tell
with
me
the
something
Drifters.
about that?
Yeah. Toured with the Drifters for 30 years,
Oh my
and I'm
goodness!
still doing Drifter shows.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I got in the group 30 years ago. I met Charlie Thomas. I got to send a picture to you so you could see how young
Okay,
I was when I got in the group. But
yeah. Can you send me? Yeah, you know what? You can send me some pictures. You know, if you have any pictures in your
yeah,
if you have
I'll
any
send you some
pictures and
pictures.
stuff, you can send them to me so I can use them in this video.
Yeah, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
So, I met Charlie. It was a funny thing. I met a guy named Dave Rebels years ago, and he was a singer. And he came to my house to do a session because I had a little studio in the house. So we
Right,
did the session, and he gave me a CD, which was a cassette tape at that time.
right.
And it was a cassette tape of the Drifters, and he was working with them. So, I listened to the music. I was like, wow, these guys are pretty good. They're great.
Uh-huh.
So, I happen to be, as a musician, you're always looking for work. And I happen to be looking for work in, in the Village Voice, because that's where you could get your gigs. You go in the Village Voice and look for gigs. And they had a call out for singers for audition. So, I went to this audition. And lo and behold, Dave Revels was there. And he says, I remember you. You did my cassette tape. You did my demo. You did a great job. He said, I'm going to get you in this group. So I auditioned like with 20 guys. And out of 20 guys, uh, two of us got picked to go on the road.
Uh-huh.
And the first show that they had was in Singapore. And oddly enough, I didn't really realize where Singapore was at the time. I just thought it was a club. And my friend said to me, Robert, I was on the phone. He said, you got a gig in where? I told him, well, I got a gig in Singapore at a club. He said, Singapore? There's no club called Singapore. He says, do you know where Singapore is? I said, no, not really. He said, well, Singapore is halfway around the world. And I was like, what? I said, they got to give me some upfront money or something. They want me to. So I call up the manager, Larry Marshak, and he said, "Listen, you come to the airport, and I'll give you money to, start." So I'm like, "Okay." So I had to get my passport together and stuff. I didn't even have a passport. Yeah, oddly enough, I went to my boss first and said, "Listen, I was working in Radio Shack." I said, "Look, I got a gig going to Singapore, and I just want to take a leave of absence in case things don't work out." And she said, "Okay, go talk to the district manager." So I go to the district manager, and I says, I'm sitting in the office, and it was Radio Shack on Park Avenue, and I'm sitting there waiting to see him. And he finally lets me come in the office. So I told him, I said, "Listen, I got a gig with a group, and I want to take a leave of absence just in case things don't work out on this gig." So he just says, "Well, who's the group you're working with?" I said, "Well, I'm working with this group called the Drifters." He said, "The Drifters?" He said, "When I was in the service, they called me up on stage. Of course you can go." So then after that, I got that together, and then I went to the office in Rockefeller Center to get my passport. And I'm waiting on this long line. And the security guards calls me from the back of the line and says, "Robert Wiggins, you here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm here." He says, "Come here. Come." I saw him come all the way to the front of the line. He said, "Go see that lady sitting over there." So I go see there, and the lady looks at me and says, "Oh, I hear you're going to Singapore." Bam! She gives me my passport. And I'm like, wow, everything is working out so methodically. I just didn't. I said, "This must be God or something." So I get to the airport, and the first person I see is Joe Ham, because I was really nervous. And Joe and I were in the band together, and I said, "Well, you on this gig?" He says, "Yeah, I'm on this gig. I'm playing with the Platters." I'm like, "At least I got somebody around here I know." So then when I got to the gate, I met Larry Marshak, and on the other side of the gate where you check in was another singer called Terry King. And he just looked at Terry and said, "You out, he's in." He gave me a whole lot of money, and I got on the plane, and that was how I got in the Drifters. My first show was in Singapore. Halfway around the world, we flew from JFK to Japan, and then from Japan to Manila, and then from Manila to Singapore. And after that, I did that gig. They gave me an itinerary full for the whole year. Every day I was just flying, doing one-nighters, and with connecting flights, it came up to like 8 planes a week. We just kept flying all over the place for 30 years. It was amazing. You know.
Wow.
So I got a chance to work with some of the greatest singers on
Wow.
stage, with Jerry Butler and Duke of Earl and Little Anthony Imperials, and all the great groups.
Uh-huh.
And after that, that was it. It was the rock and roll renaissance.
Right. Well, I need to ask you a question. I need to ask you a question. What instrument did you play?
I actually sang with the group.
Oh, you sang with the group.
I just sang. I sang background, and I sang a lead on a couple of songs, and I learned a couple of Drifter songs.
Oh,
And
okay.
then, before you know it, I was, singing on dates. As time went on, you learn the show. And then I was there when they had the big stint between Larry Marshak and Charlie Thomas.
Uh-huh.
And then for a while, Charlie, Larry had a big issue with Charlie, and the work had stopped for a minute. And then next thing I know, Larry called me back to do some more gigs. and he had me fronting the group, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing Robert Wiggins and the Drifters gigs, and they've been booking me. But it was amazing, working with original guys, Charlie and Barry Hobbs. Barry Hobbs died, and I worked with Benny King, and it was just an amazing. It was like an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like an adventure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you said you went to Drifter for 30 years?
Yep, for 30 years I traveled with
Oh
Charlie
my
Thomas. When
goodness.
they got inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I
Yes.
was in the group, and we had just finished doing a show at Madison Square Garden. And next thing I know, it was like these umbrellas and cameras and click, 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 click. And they're
Oh,
like, you're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the Drifters as the last generation. And the Drifters go
wow.
back like 50 years. And that why they call it the Drifters, because there's so many different groups in and out of the group. Too many different guys in and out of the group. They called them the Drifters. And
Oh,
it
I
started with
see.
Clive McFadden and Thrasher Brothers, and then then
Uh-huh.
uh, then Charlie and this group called the Five Crowns did a show at the Apollo, and George Treadwell, who was the owner of the name at the time, heard them and
Yes.
hired them to be the Drifters, and they did "There Goes My Baby," and that was a whole set of new hits,
Yes.
and so they did "Under the Boardwalk," "There Goes My Baby," "Save the Last Dance," and so it was. Then Benny left, and he recorded "Stand
Uh-huh.
by Me." So Charlie was with he got together with Larry, and once he got together with Larry, Larry allowed him to get his own group. And then the groups kind of split up. You had a group in Europe, and then you had Bill Pinkney on the West Coast, and you had Charlie Thomas on the East Coast.
Uh-huh. Can you
And
talk just a little bit louder?
huh?
Yeah, okay, no, I couldn't quite hear you
I
too
said they
well.
had okay, I fixed. They had like Charlie on the East Coast and Bill Pinkney on the West Coast, and then they had another group in Europe. So all the songs of the Drifters were sang by different singers. All
Uh-huh.
their hits. Johnny Moore did "Under the Boardwalk," and he was in Europe with George Treadwell, with Faye Treadwell. After George Treadwell died, Faye got a group, and I believe that Larry renewed the name because the name had went down, and that's how Larry got in the drifter business, and he owned the name for a while. And then they had a big court battle between him and Faye Treadwell and the Marvelettes and quite a few groups. But he did have a couple originals. So he had Charlie and he had Barry Hobbs. So me, Charlie, Nate Whitson, and myself, we traveled with the original group
Right.
for the remainder of the 30 years after the group kind of started breaking up.
Uh-huh.
And then finally, Charlie broke up with Larry, and then everything kind of went crazy for a while.
Mm.
It was a big smear campaign. Charlie had got a new manager. Then
Uh-huh.
eventually, Barry Hobbs died
Mm.
because he had gave Barry his own group, and we saw all of a sudden we saw Barry with Barry had got sick while we were on the road. We was in Chicago, and he called me down to his room and he told me, he said, "Look, call Charlie and tell him I can't go on. I'm sick." And they had to airlift him to a hospital. And then from there, we hadn't, he had stopped working with us for a while because he was sick with cancer. and he recovered. And then when he came back, they gave him his own group.
Mhm.
So that was the beginning of the two originals who split up.
Right.
So there was a lot of that going on, you know. So Barry had his own group, and Charlie had his own group, and Charlie was really upset because that meant that it took a little chunk out of our work.
Mhm.
So we worked for the most part, and then finally, Charlie and Larry got into it,
Yeah.
and they broke up. Charlie and Larry fired Charlie, and it was a big smear campaign, big thing in the news and all that. And
Yeah.
that was going on for a while.
Wow.
And Charlie got a new manager, got his own group, and the group that then Barry died.
Uh-huh.
And it was funny because the guys that was backing up Barry
Yeah.
was the Joneses, and so after Barry died and Charlie left, the work was like little. So me and the guys got together and we worked with a group called Soul Cruisers. And then I just did weddings, and then about 3 years ago, Larry got control of the name again, and he called me and said, "You want to work?" I'm like, "Okay, let's go."
Yeah.
And the next thing I know, I was doing lead vocals.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
that's how I started working as Robert Wiggins of the Drifters.
Okay.
And
When you worked with him as as the drifter,
huh?
you worked with him as the drifter or
Yeah, well, I worked with them as with the Drifters because the Drifters was always like it was like the Platters. The
yeah.
groups at that time, they were like trademarks.
Uh-huh.
So the managers owned the names.
Okay.
The guys in the group didn't own the names at that time. Not like
Oh,
today, you got
okay.
the Temptations and all that. So if the manager said, "Well, you want to work? If you know the lead vocals, you can sing lead."
Okay.
And I knew all the songs. I know how to play all the songs. I know how to sing them.
Yeah.
So they I end up doing, but I end up recording the group right before they got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I
Right.
recorded Barry and Charlie, and we did a song called Mr. Bagman, and we did a bunch of 80s songs, Get Down Tonight, and all these different songs on a single. And we got some radio play. And that kind of fueled this here feud because Charlie didn't want to give his manager a cut of the money. And that kind of fueled the breakup. But soon after that, we were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as the last generation. So in reality, um, it was the last group that actually recorded as the Drifters with originals. So there's like I'd say maybe a couple thousand of those records out there, and they're like collector's items because they're the very last Drifter recordings.
Mm.
So and I was lucky enough to help produce that album, that single. So
Okay.
they kind of been working with me every now and then. They'll call me in on a gig. Being I started working for the Board of Ed, I had to start turning down gigs.
Right. Okay.
And then, I worked for the Board of Ed for the last 15 years. And then 3 years ago, he's like, "Well, you don't have to leave your job. You can work on the weekends." I'm like, "Okay."
Uh-huh.
So I've been getting bookings on the weekends and stuff. And I plan to retire and probably maybe pick up a tour and do some more drifter gigs. I
Mhm.
got a couple promoters who promoting me.
Right.
So,
What were you doing with the board of education?
huh?
What were you doing with the board of education?
Before the what was I doing before the
No, what were you doing with the board of education?
Before the Drifters?
Well, the one education, you were doing that after the
Oh,
drift.
yeah, well, when I worked for the Board of Ed, that was like 15 years. I mean, like, I worked for the Drifters steady before I worked for the Board of Ed. It was like
Uh-huh.
my job. I was like just traveling.
Right.
And those guys, one thing Larry Marshak booked the group. Like he booked the group. Like I think we worked more than any group because by the time we got to New York, we had been all over the country. We just was traveling. I mean, Supremes, the Temptations,
Mhm.
the Spinners. We were just playing with everybody on everybody's show. And a lot of times, the Drifters were headlining a lot of shows.
Uh-huh.
So um, when the work started, when they had their little stint with Charlie, then I kind of went off on my own for a minute and just started working tri-state, because I could get a lot of gigs because of the Drifters. A lot of people was booking me because you get well known in those circles, and they know I was on the gig, so they would book. I work with the Marty Stevens Orchestra. I work with the Soul Cruisers. I work with so I was working, and then as the time went on, I just kind of decided to get a steady gig, because at the time, through all those years when Charlie was in battle with the manager, he had lost the right to use the name for a while because he lost in his court case. So for a while, the Drifters' work had dried up for a minute, and so then I was just doing gigs, and then after a while, I decided, well, my mom's was like, you need to make sure you get you a medical and get you a good job.
Right. Yeah.
And I took her advice and I landed a job with the Board of Ed. And, for the first time in my life, I had a real steady job. That was amazing.
Yeah, but what are you doing that with that?
So that's when I ran into you and I was going into, doing production and doing ministry. And, I was
Yeah.
able to maintain a regular lifestyle.
Right.
For that first 30 years, I was just gone all the time,
Uh-huh.
you know, just always on the road.
Yeah.
So for like the last, I say 15, 16 years, I maintained a steady lifestyle, turned around, got married, and, you know, now I'm ready to get back on the road.
Oh, wow.
I'm ready to go to Europe or something.
Yes.
But
Uh-huh.
it's been quite a journey, and I can't say anything because I've been more places in 30 years than most people been in a lifetime.
Mhm.
Traveling. We went to Singapore. We went to Japan. We was all through the Caribbean, all through Canada.
Uh-huh.
So we was just all over the place, constantly flying and it was weird because it was all one nighters. So whenever we got a week somewhere, that was like a vacation.
Uh-huh.
So like we'd go to Kissimmee and go to Wolfman Jack's club, and that was like a vacation because he had a club and he put us in a hotel for a week or two, and we were like, yeah, we. So
Uh-huh.
most of the time we were just going bip 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 all over the place,
Yeah.
one nighters, flying here, flying there, Oklahoma tomorrow. Tomorrow you in San Francisco. It was like amazing that people work like that all the time. You don't realize it. Even the Temps and the Supremes, people don't realize how much those groups work.
Yeah. Well, I like to know what's in the future for you.
Well, I've been in the ministry and been doing ministry now for the last 6, 7 years, and I've gotten so deeply into the ministry till it's been You know, I grew the beard, and I did a campaign video for Joe Biden called "Stand by Biden." I did a Drifter song, and it got quite a few listeners. Thousands of people loved it. I was so surprised, and I was like, when you're looking to get, when I'm looking to get exposure, all I just do is sing a Drifter song, and then all of a sudden, boom, I got all this exposure. So I plan to continue to do Drifter's music to keep that legacy alive, because I'm a part of it. And I've been writing a lot of different music and doing production, stuff like that. But between the Drifters, it's such a pure time that even doing religious music, the music of that era is so pure and moralistic that it just I feel it,
Right.
in me, like
But one of the
it's
things
just good music.
yeah, one of the things that I would like to do now is I'd like for you to give us some information on how we can reach out to you, how the audience reach out to you, and everything. You know, different things you can tell us about.
Mhm.
Like I on YouTube, your Facebook, give us information. We'll put it out at the end of our show.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'll send you everything because I'll give you my Facebook page. I'll send you a couple of videos. I have a short video where I was doing the campaign that really
Right.
went off well
Okay.
for the Joe Biden campaign. That really went really well. And I have some material where I'm just doing some Christmas songs
All right.
that
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to close out the show today, and I want to thank you for being my guest on Carol Johnson TV.
anytime.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
very much. Okay. Goodbye.
All right. It's so nice to meet you and see you again.
Okay. I want to thank the audience for tuning in to Carol Johnson TV, and I hope to see you next week. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, oh yeah, oh yeah. When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light you'll see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you vote for Joe Biden. So